Now with our GMA cover story and more on the deadly shooting on the set of the Alec Baldwin film Rust. Joining us now is Jason Bowles, the attorney for Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer for the production. Mr. Bowles, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And I want to start with the chain of command on the gun that was used in the fatal shooting. But when the crew broke for lunch, your client told investigators that the guns were locked away, but ammunition was left unsecured on a cart. When production resumed, who handled the gun and who ultimately gave it to Baldwin?
Thank you and good morning. Thank you for having me on. At that point at 11 a.m. that morning, the gun was loaded with dummy rounds. Those are inert rounds incapable of firing on the cart. When Hannah came back from lunch, approximately 10 minutes after that, 12 something, she then showed that firearm to Mr. Halls, the assistant director. She spun the cylinder, showed him each of the rounds in that firearm, and then she gave the firearm to Mr. Halls. At that point, he had the gun. He went into the church. He said he was going to hold it. At that point, Hannah, there was no scene going on. There was no rehearsal. There was tech prep with the cameras. They were trying to set up, figure out where they're going to be. So with nothing going on, Hannah left the church to resume her duties in her prop job.
And by saying that she picked up the gun, she spun the cylinder, are you trying to say that she rechecked the gun before it was given to Alec Baldwin?
She did spin the cylinder. She showed Mr. Halls each of the rounds. There were 6 dummy rounds that she had loaded into that firearm that she believed had been dummy rounds. She did spin it. She did check it. She did, by spinning it, by showing it to Mr. Halls, gave it to Mr. Halls. We then know that he had the firearm in the church, and that firearm then ended up with Mr. Baldwin. It was not given to Mr. Baldwin by Hannah. I believe it went to him through Mr. Halls, and that was the chain of custody of that weapon.
And does Hannah know how a live bullet got into that weapon?
No, and I appreciate you asking that. That's going to be the biggest question in this case, and that's something we're very on and we're looking at. We're going to work closely with law enforcement, do anything we can to cooperate. The FBI is running forensic testing, evidence, DNA and fingerprint. That's going to be critical in terms of who put that live round on the scene. Multiple live rounds, we understand, were recovered, and why. Because the other interesting fact about this, there was a box of labeled dummy rounds that Hannah had been pulling from. She knew were dummy rounds. Somebody put that live round or live rounds in that box. When you do that, you can only have bad intentions because you're going to confuse the rounds if you're the armorer. And they appear very similarly. The dummy rounds look like a regular live round.
So you're saying that it could have been purposely done?
We are looking at that possibility. We're afraid that could have been what happened here, that somebody intended to sabotage this set with a live round intentionally placed in a box of dummies. Otherwise, you wouldn't, first of all, you wouldn't bring a live round on the set. But second of all, why do you place that in the box labeled dummies that the armorer is going to be pulling from? Everybody knows they're going to be getting them from there. Why would you do that other than to try to cause some incident on the set? Now, we're not saying anybody had any intent there was going to be a tragedy, a homicide, but they wanted to do something to cause a safety incident on set. But that's what we believe happened.
And that's a very, very serious allegation. Do you have any evidence to support that?
Well, the biggest evidence we have is that there is a box of dummies and there's live rounds within that box. We know Hannah did not put the live rounds in that box. We know the live rounds shouldn't have been in that box, but they were. So there can be very, very few explanations for why live rounds end up in a box of dummy prop ammunition on a movie set. And one of them is that somebody wants that to go into a firearm and they wants that to be an incident on the set. There's no other reason to mix a live round with the dummies. There's just none.
And you said that Hannah handed the AD the gun and she left the church. So the gun was in the church without Hannah.
It was in the church without Hannah, that is correct. And she didn't believe there was anything happening at that point. There was no rehearsal There was no scene going on. It was a tech prep where the cameras were setting up, positioning, so there was not supposed to be happening. Had they called her in, and usually they do, they call Hannah in and they say, we're about to do a scene involving a firearm. She'll go in, she'll re-instruct Mr. Baldwin on the safety features, what he's doing in this shot. She'll go through the gun again, she'll inspect it again, and that's how it worked on this set. Well, she wasn't called back because there wasn't a scene, there wasn't a shot in terms of the movie.
Well, you know, investigators, they say they found 500 rounds of ammunition on set, including blanks, as you said, dummy rounds and live rounds. Why were there live rounds on the set in the first place?
And that's the biggest question in the whole case. The blanks, as you know, Michael, they are designed to, they're crimped at the end. They don't resemble a live bullet. They fire off powder. They just are for sound and the look of the powder coming out. The dummy rounds resemble a live round. They've got a projectile tip. That's what their purpose is. When the camera looks at them in a revolver, it looks like a real round. There is no purpose for a live round on this set, zero. And Hannah made that cut. There was no reason for there to be live rounds. She didn't have live rounds. She didn't purchase any of this ammunition. This ammunition was purchased by other people, production. So whoever brought these live rounds on set was wrong, and I think they had a bad intention. That's what we believe.
Well, there are reports that crew members used prop guns from the set for live target practice. Does your client have any knowledge of that?
She never saw anything like that. She doesn't believe that happened. I don't know who's saying that, but we don't believe that happened. She certainly never saw it. She was extremely safety conscious on this set. She did her best to train people. She was given limited training days. She trained Alec Baldwin one-on-one on a day. She did her best to ensure nobody ever pointed a firearm at anybody on the set, and that was one of her things. Don't point it at a human being. But she did her best on that. She never saw anybody target practicing.
Who else on set would have access to the guns, and why?
There were 3 people that had access to those guns in the prop truck, and that was Hannah, Sarah, who was the prop master, and another assistant. They had the code to the safe. The firearm would be locked in the safe. Now, the ammunition was not locked up. The ammunition was out because it was dummy rounds, everybody believed, and blanks. Neither of which was locked up or secured. So that box of dummy rounds, it was capable of being tampered with, and we believe that's what occurred.
And in your statement, you said Hannah was hired for 2 jobs, which made it hard for her to focus on her armorer duties. And since she had only worked on 1 feature film before this one, was she too experienced to handle the work? Inexperienced to handle the work?
I would say no. Yes, sir. No, I would say no, and the reason is her father, a longtime person in this industry, Thel Reed, very well respected. He taught her literally from the age of 10, taking her on sets, teaching her about firearm safety. She is actually very experienced. We talked to her at length yesterday. She knows firearms, she knows safety, she knows the principles, she knows how to do. This is not about her being inexperienced. It's about a production set where they didn't give the resources. They didn't have, she wasn't a full-time armorer. They didn't pay her for that. They didn't have her on that. And it's the way they wanted to allocate resources and the emphasis on profitability, frankly, over safety. That's really what the case is.
Mr. Bowles, we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, hey there, GMA fans. Robin Roberts here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Lots of great stuff here. So go on, click the subscribe button right over here to get more of awesome videos and content from GMA every day, anytime. We thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the morning on GMA.